Sure.
Welcome to another webinar from the Issaquah Senior Center. Today we're doing preparedness in a pandemic, fostering preparedness within your community. And we have Kathy Brosh with the Carnation Duval Citizens Corp. So one of our members here told me about this presentation. So if any of you have ideas or thoughts about speakers or topics, please let me know. If you can also please mute yourself when you're talking, or when you're not talking rather. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kathy. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, let's see. Catherine, can you go ahead and disable or allow me to share my screen? It looks like it's not allowing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure, I forgot to do that. There you go.
All right, thank you. Let's see, it might need to, it's not sharing my screen. Let me try this. All right, can you see my screen at all now?
Yep.
All right, let me go over and get the slideshow started. Great, all right. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. We are going to be talking about preparedness in a pandemic. My name is Kathy Brash, and as Catherine had mentioned, I'm with the Carnation Duval Citizen Corps. I'm the current president, and I'm also a Red Cross shelter manager. And thank you, Catherine, for working with the Issaquah Seniors Center to bring this information to your different clients. So thank you. If you're not familiar with using Zoom, there are some different things where you can write something in the chat if you have a question, or you can raise your hand. If you take and move your mouse over the screen, you should get those to pop up. So feel free to do that, or if you can even just jump in if you have a question. So what is the big deal about preparedness? These are some of the questions that always come up to me. That do disasters happen where I live? And what should I do to be prepared for any kind of a local event? What things should I have in my supplies and my kit? Why is the pandemic something to think about? Why should I keep my family safe in a pandemic? How can I use supplies and PPE or personal preparedness equipment? How can I find out current and accurate information about the pandemic, or help my family with this? And what's next? What can I do in my community to help? So, do disasters happen where I live? Well, yes, they do. We think of disasters as anything that's a serious disruption to the functioning of a community. And you can have losses of human life, you can have losses of material, of course, economic losses and environmental losses. And these impacts exceed the ability of the affected community to cope with using its own resources. So it's a disaster if we need to be able to reaching out to other people for help as well. Believe it or not, this is a list of some of the hazards and disasters that we could see in our area. Of course, right now, mostly we're thinking about the pandemic, or we're thinking about the upcoming wildfire season, but all these other items are things that certainly can and have happened in our region, not just around the country, but around here as well. Probably the ones that we think about most in a year's time, at least where I live in Carnation, is the effects of floodings, because we have that every year. So it's like, how do we deal with that? Thankfully, we haven't had too many since I've lived here that have been at the catastrophic level, but they certainly still do happen. So basically, we're wanting to figure out what I can do in advance of these events to be better prepared to minimize any kinds of things that can happen from that, be it damage, injury, discomfort, or death. Recently, for the Carnation Duval Citizen Corps, we reached out to our members on our Facebook page, and we asked them a number of questions and wanted to see what their responses were. So the first question we asked was, were you and your family prepared for the COVID-19 pandemic overall? And you can see some of the answers there in terms of yes, or I needed more supplies, sort of, or no. So hopefully these are, we can give information to everybody to help you be ready for not only a pandemic, but any other future types of events that might happen. So what should I do to be prepared for local events? We always want to talk about planning, preparedness planning, because of course, just like any other thing, if you prepare for things, you're so much better able to respond to them if they happen. Some of the steps that you can take would be to simply be aware of the hazards in your area. And those were some of them that we just looked at that previous slide. You can do things like actively participate, take local training. I know Joyce had mentioned that she had recently taken CERT training, so that is a great place to start. Also, volunteering gets you connected to your community to find out what kinds of things your community might need and how you could help out. But the biggest steps in preparedness are to make a plan, to build a kit, and then get some supplies to have available for you, and to communicate with others what you have learned. So I always like to start with making a plan because this sort of shapes everything that you're going to be doing. One of the most important things you want to do is to have an out-of-state contact. They say that by trying to phone someone locally, you may not get through because all the lines are going to be tied up. But one of the best ways to reach out to people actually is to text or to call somebody who lives out of state. And you want to make sure that all of your family members know that number. So when something happens, if you're in different places and you can't reach each other, you can call this out-of-state contact and let them know that you're okay and where they are. And then they'll also relay that information to your other family members that call in. So that's one of the things you want to do ahead of time, is let those other people know that, hey, I'm going to be calling you if something happens. So just understand you might be getting other calls. You want to also figure a location for your family to meet if your home is damaged or destroyed, because again, you could all be in different locations. You could be in Seattle, someone could be working. You could have family that's at another spot. You could have kids who are at school or grandkids that you're taking care of that might be at school. So you want to figure out, if you can't get to your home, where else could you meet? It could be a park just up the street from your home or just someplace close. You also want to figure out how you would care for your children or your pets or other people living in your home if you're not able to get there. I think about specifically for seniors, do you have a caregiver? Do you need to be able to reach out to them? Can they reach out to you? Is there any special equipment that you need? Do you have oxygen? Do you have a wheelchair? Do you have medications that need to come with you as well? And how might you be transported? Do you have a neighbor that can help you out? So this is the beginnings, I hope, of a way for you to connect with all your neighbors and let them know what your situation is, and also figure out how you can help them. One of the things we'll talk about a little bit later on is a Map Your Neighborhood program, and that helps to designate certain areas within your little neighborhood, maybe a care center where all the kids could go, or a health center where you could go if you have some injuries or need some first aid. So again, these are things you all want to think about when you're making your plan. The second question we asked was, what would you have liked to have had in your preparedness kits or supplies you don't already have? Obviously, one of the biggest responses was masks and more relevant PPE, or the personal protective equipment. People talked about toilet paper, which we know there was a big run on toilet paper at the very beginning of this. Hand sanitizer and sanitizing wipes. The next one may sound a little silly. Men used to use my dry goods. What else do I need for this dish? Well, we all know that we're going to have a number of things in our pantry, but can you actually make a meal out of it? So you want to maybe have a menu and then have the items that are needed for that. That way you can make sure that your pantry is fully stocked or your freezer is stocked, so that you'll have those things to put into meals that you want to make. There were also requests for instructions on how to use or to make supplies and masks, and then just general more pantry items and dry goods. So what things should I have in my supplies and my kits? This picture is meant to prioritize the things that you really want to get first. Usually we suggest that you should have about 1 hour to find some sort of shelter if you happen to be outside. You know, that could be a tent, maybe you have an RV, maybe you have a vehicle that you can shelter in, but you want to be able to figure out some way that you can stay safe and dry if something is happening and you can't get into your home. Then we say that we have 1 day to find water. Of course, we are hoping that you have some bottled with you. If you're in your car, that you'll have some there. Of course, that you'll stock some at your home as well. And believe it or not, we say that you have 1 week to find food. So it won't be real comfortable, but you could go for up to a week without food, but you definitely need to have shelter and water first. Water really is the key to survival. And so where are the things that you can find some extra water? One of the big things is your hot water tank. And as you can see in the picture here, this is strapped down to the wall so that if we were to have an earthquake, this would not be falling over. And you know, you figure you have anywhere from 50 to 75 to 100 gallons of water in your tank. And if you notice at the bottom of the picture, there's a little spigot. So you can actually drain water out of your hot water tank if you need to. If for some reason there's been an earthquake and maybe it's broken the pipes in your home, you might not be able to turn on the tap and get water, but you still will have this reservoir of water. Excuse me. If you live on a system where you have a well, that should be functioning as long as you have a way to operate it. You know, do you have power to your well? We all, of course, talk about bottled water. That could be individual bottles that you get from Costco, or it could be gallons of jugs. I have a number of gallons of jugs stored around my home, and I also have, I believe it's a 20-gallon, just a tank that you could use like for collecting rainwater, and that's always full of bottled water as well. The toilet reservoir, which I know may sound a little bit silly, but in the upper portion of it, that is still fresh water, and that's a really good source of water if you have pets. People might be a little bit more concerned about using it, which if you were, you could always boil it, or you could add bleach to it or use a filter system. But that's a great source of water for your pets. Of course, if you live by a river or lake, that is always a great source. Flowing water is better than a standing water like in a lake. Again, you might want to invest in some sort of a filtering system. Sometimes you can buy a little pump system from, like, say, REI. You can pump up to maybe 1,000 gallons before that filter needs to be replaced. Or a lot of times you'll see the little life straws that you can carry really easily in a backpack, and you can use that for filling up your own water supply as well. Remember that everything that you eat and drink has some amount of water in it. Well, not everything, but most things do have some water in it as well. So you will get some moisture for that. It is recommended that you have 1 gallon of water per person per day. So you figure out how many people, if you've got 2 people in your household. So each day you're going to need 2 gallons of water, and that's going to be used for not only cooking and drinking, but also for cleaning or for your own personal use. So again, this is some samples of what you might have for getting your water. The next thing they talk about is that you want to have some sort of a mobile kit. And the reason we suggest a mobile kit is because if you are in your car and you are in Seattle and all of a sudden there's an earthquake and all the bridges go out, you probably are going to have to be walking home. So you want to have these kinds of supplies in a kit that you can put on your back. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but a couple things to point out. Of course, you really want to have either in your kit or in your car, you want to have some good sturdy shoes or boots for walking, because again, you might be walking. And a headlamp or a flashlight. I really prefer a headlamp because you can put that on your head and leave your hands free for whatever else you need to do. But again, there's a good list of things here. Again, you see the contact numbers for your out-of-state contact and your medications, some extra cash in a little envelope. You know, what's really great when you're putting together a kit is to use those clear Ziploc bags, because then you can see and you can organize everything and you can see what's in the bag. You just have to pull out the individual bags and you can see easily what you need to get to. Some people talk about having chargers for phones, and I know some folks will actually carry a really small solar device. I have one that's about the size of my phone, and it will charge my phone. I just put it out in the sun, plug my phone into it, It's got a little multi-outlet thing, so you could use it for different kinds of phones, and then that will charge my phone as I need it. But again, something that you want to have in your car. This might also be the same kind of a kit that you have at home. At home, you might have a few more items you're going to want to put into it. Personally, at home, we have a large garbage can that is on wheels. And so I can put larger things in it, like sleeping bags and a tent, and then all my different supplies, and I can just roll that around as I need it. But again, this at a minimum is something that you want to think about putting into your cars. A little bit to talk about sanitation. There are ways to build your own portable toilet. As you can see, the one picture on the left there shows a bucket with a plastic bag inside of it. And you can buy these little toilet tops from almost any preparedness place online. I've also seen people use a pool noodle. That works really well too. You just cut it to size and wrap it around the top of the can and just plop it in place. That works really well. Of course, we talk about our hand sanitizers. Here's an example of someone putting their toilet paper inside of a coffee container so you can just pull it out like if it was on a regular roll. And then the last picture shows someone making their own portable hand washing station, just using a bottle of bottled water and hanging it up. So a lot of different things you can do as far as sanitizing. Here's some other things that you want to consider either putting in your pack or at least having available. Of course, we talked a little bit about the phone charger, and this one that they show is not a solar one, but again, you can charge those up and carry that with you and then use that easily to charge your phone as well. You want to have some personal papers, maybe your passport. Looks like there's a map there. There's also another kit there that has to do with your first aid supplies. You know, sometimes you can either get a bigger one like this or you can get a small one that you can just simply carry around in your pack. You want to make sure you have some extra money. And I know they used to say coins, but there are very few regular phone booths around anymore. But you know, if you can find one, might be helpful if your phone's not working. A lot of times the landlines are working, so you might want to make sure to have a couple extra coins as well. And of course, don't forget about your pets, because they're going to be right along there with you and they're going to need their own supplies. Making sure that you've got a leash, and it looks like they've got a little foldable bag there that you can use. That must be a watering dish, or you could use it for food. But again, when you're making your kit, be sure to put some pet food in for them and something that they'll eat, because they're going to be stressed out too. So you want to have something that's comfortable for them. And of course, your emergency information. There are a lot of places where you can download these things, or you could even put this in your phone, make one special page that has all of your emergency information as well. And there's something that comes out from Washington State Department of Emergency Management. There is a booklet that you can use to prepare in a year. And you can see as we look at this picture, there are a number of different things that you want to consider as you're making your preparedness things. And I believe this is more like a table of contents, but you can go to each one of these sections and it will tell you a little bit more how to do it. Also, you can put this in your planning calendar. You know, what can I do each month? What do I want to do? Maybe the first month is you're putting together your plan. And then as you go along, you know, do these different items. I know that for the Red Cross, they had developed a calendar for the year of things that you should buy each month, or you could actually, I believe it was broken down into weeks, so that each week you could go to the grocery store and pick up a couple of extra items to add to your kit. And this is something that's really great to do with kids too, because they love to track these things. And you can put them in charge of, okay, what do we need to purchase this week? So it doesn't get overwhelming to have to buy everything all at once, but at least you know that you're getting everything covered and you're getting yourself organized in a year's time. So do we have any questions so far about what we've talked about, whether it's planning or putting your kit together or getting general supplies? And again, these are things that have to do with disasters in general, but we're going to talk a little bit more about the pandemic preparedness as well.
Something that we did in our neighborhood last year is that we hosted a police night out in our backyard. It was a potluck and we had 40 neighbors come over. We won't be doing it this year, obviously. And I also had picked up a whole collection of good things from Andrew Stevens, our city emergency preparedness director, just for takeaways for people. And it was also a great opportunity because we are set back from the street quite a distance to be able to see our neighbors and put names to them. It was just wonderful to do that.
Oh, absolutely, Joyce. That's a great idea. I will bet that was probably National Night Out, was it? Maybe the
It
first
was.
weekend in
Yeah.
August? Yeah,
Yes.
great. And actually, I participated in a number of those in the Duval area. I know they had something set up last year where the police and the fire departments and city representatives would go around different neighborhoods in the city where they had planned gatherings. And, you know, same thing, you get your neighbors together, you talk about not only crime prevention and how you can help each other, but this is a great venue to be able to share information about emergency preparedness. So kudos to you for you doing that with your neighbors. And it's fun too.
True.
Okay, so moving along, what should I do to keep my family safe in a pandemic? Some of the best practices, of course, are the ones that we've been hearing about from the CDC and on the news in general. The most basic one being hand washing. I believe they're recommending 20 seconds for you can sing happy birthday through twice, and that will do it for you. Social distancing, trying to keep 6 feet between people at a minimum. Of course, using our personal protective equipment. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but right now we're just suggesting, of course, masks, I believe, are required within the state of Washington. So you want to have a couple of them so that you can be rotating them through the laundry as you're doing that, or if you have some disposable ones, I think there are ways that you can leave those set for a couple of days and then reuse it again. But most importantly, we want to make sure that you're getting the correct and the most current information that's out there. There is a lot of information on the internet and of course on social media, but you want to make sure that it is correct and current. So you want to figure out a couple of news sources that are most reliable and use those if you want to get some updates. Again, we talked about social distancing, keeping that minimum of 6 feet between you and others, and avoiding the group gatherings. I believe right now in our county, I think at phase 2, I think you can have gatherings of 5 or more, and if you're in phase 3, I believe it's up to 10. But again, whatever you can do to keep those distances is really going to make a big difference. I think they're finding nowadays that that seems to be one of the most ways that people are sharing the coronavirus is by having large family gatherings, and they're all in close quarters. You know, if you can keep things outside, that will make a big difference too. And if you've been to the park lately, you have seen all the signs that they say about, you know, welcome to the park, but keep moving. So they want you to not just gather in groups, but keep moving through it and use the park for what it was meant for. Of course, we want to make sure that you're wearing a mask at all times when you're outdoors or when you're in areas of exposure, such as the grocery stores. Of course, doctors' offices are requiring them. Restaurants and a lot of large business are specifically requiring them as well. When we talk about personal protective equipment or PPE, we first of all are talking about that mask, which is either disposable or washable. Gloves, if you have them. Hand sanitizer is a great thing to have as well. If you can't wash your hands immediately, then hand sanitizer is going to be your next best bet. And of course, the wipes that you can use. You can do some handmade ones or ones, although I think they're a little harder to find right now. But you want to wipe down the commonly used surfaces. And just be a little careful about when you're doing your phone because some of them have restrictions on what you can use on them. You don't want to damage the screen. But things like door handles and toilet handles, sink handles, all those are something that you probably want to think about wiping down once a day. So our third question was, do you understand how to use PPE or have questions about when you need or when you should use it? So thankfully, most people said that they know how to use it. So that's always a great thing. We have a few people that wanted to know a little bit more or that they don't know how to put it on or take it off properly. So how do I use supplies and PPE? These are a couple slides that came from the CDC. This one is specifically talking about if you have to use several kinds of PPE, you want to put them on in a specific order. So we recommend that you put your mask on first. And they don't show it here, but usually you want to just grab the mask by its handles. You don't want to be touching the part that is over your face, other than when you fit the nose piece. As you can see in the second picture there, there's a little nose piece wire in most masks, and you want to fit that to your nose so that it keeps air from circulating too much by your nose. If you are wearing goggles, that would be the next thing you would put on. And although probably most of us won't be using it, if you are in a work situation where you are required to, then the last thing you want to do is to put on the face shield. If you're doing other PPE, I know they didn't show it on here first, but it looks like this person has a gown on first. Okay, and then the last thing they put on is the gloves. So when you are starting to take this PPE off, you want to first start by taking off your gloves. And if you've ever taken a first aid class, they will talk to you about how you want to slide those off by first taking one glove and turning it inside out, just keeping that on your hand, and then taking the other glove with your free finger and turning it inside out and wrapping them together so that the exposed outside areas of your gloves are now kept to the inside. And so if you've had any contamination on your gloves, that will keep it from being spread. Next, you would take off your, now see, I don't understand that. How could you take off your goggles if you still had a mask on or the face shield on? But I guess in this case, they're saying if you're not wearing a face shield, you would take off your goggles next. And then same thing, take off your face shield next. And the last thing that's going to come off is your mask. So here they're showing you someone removing your mask. Again, you want to make sure that you're not touching the face portion of your mask because that may be what's contaminated. So you're either grabbing it by the strings, or if you have ear pieces, those would come off last. I have seen pictures of people where they have taken their mask and they've slid it down to their neck when they're eating or doing something else. Actually, that's not a great idea, because if you were to think of your neck as, like, say, if you had on your mask and you got sprayed by a spray bottle of water, okay, your face portion covered by the mask is going to stay dry, but everything around that is going to be getting wet, including your neck area. So if you were to slide your neck or your mask down to your neck, basically you're sliding it down to an area that is possibly contaminated. So they're recommending that you don't do that. You would probably be better off to take it off by the earpieces if you have to, like if you're in a restaurant, and then set it down or keep it in a place so that it's not being contaminated if you're going to have to put this back on again. And then of course you want to follow up by either hand washing for 20 seconds, or if that's not something available to you, you would be using the hand sanitizer. What would you add to your preparedness kit for a pandemic? So things that normally you might not see in your kit, of course, would talk about the PPE, making sure that you have enough for your whole family. And I know they're recommending for masks, again, if you either have several of them available so that you can switch them between usages, or have a number of disposable ones. You want to have your hand sanitizer and your sanitary wipes. Any kit should have your extra medications in it, but specifically for a pandemic, you want to make sure that you've thought that through. And I know a lot of people say, gosh, I can only get so many supplies from my pharmacist. They don't give me extra meds to be able to store up. What I have done with my medications is approximately 1 week before my medication is going to run out, I will go ahead and get it renewed. And then I will have actually an extra week's worth of medication for me, and I will put part of that aside so that over the course of several months, you will have about a month's worth of medication saved aside. And you want to make sure to rotate that through your usage well. So you don't want to get that little extra supply of medication and then hold it there for 2 years. You know, no, that's not really effective for it. So you want to make sure to rotate it through. And you want to have a few more food items when sheltering at home. Because if you remember, especially when the pandemic first started, there was a lot of questions about people going to the grocery store. You know, should I do that? Could I do that? Do I have someone in my home that I would be exposing if I went to the store? Of course, there are a lot of different ways we can do that now. You can do your shopping remotely, and then you can just drive by and pick it up. Most grocery stores will deliver that out to your vehicle, or some grocery stores will actually deliver it directly to your home. But I think you'll want to find out that you want to have more of those non-perishables or frozen items at your home, so that it's not something your first concern is, oh, I have to go out and buy milk. Well, you know, if you have some powdered milk in your pantry, then that will save you, you know, at least a week or a couple of days, so that you don't have to immediately think about going out into your local grocery store. But again, think about extra items that you might want to have at home. How can I find out current and accurate information about the pandemic? Remember how I said this is really important? You want to make sure that you are not either reading or passing misinformation. So this is, I know the top of the screen didn't show up. This is actually off of the King County Public Health. They have something that's called a dashboard. And what I did is I went into their dashboard for general statistics, and I grabbed up the summary counts for Issaquah. And I believe this was just as of yesterday. So you can see here exactly how many tests have been made and how many were new since just yesterday, how many positives, how many hospitalizations, and how many deaths. And then it also can talk about how that compares to the King County rate. And here is a diagram where it actually shows you the number of test results since February. And I know there are a number of different dashboards on the King County Public Health website, and they break it down into racial areas. I think they break it down talking about the homelessness. So there are about 7 different dashboards, but you can look for the one for just the summary counts if you want to know what's happening in your area. And this is set up so that I believe all of the cities in King County actually have a link. So if I wanted to find something for Carnation, I would just go to the drop-down menu that would be on the top right there where it says Issaquah for you. And on that drop-down menu, it would say either Carnation or Duval. And I could click on those and find out more information. So again, if you want to find the latest stats, go to a reliable source such as King County Public Health. Here's a number of different links that you can find out more information. Of course, you can go through the governor. There's the State of Washington Department of Health. Of course, the CDC has a lot of information, public health. And then for me, I've got the cities of Duval and Carnation, but I'm sure that Issaquah also has a link there as well. Again, remember to only trust the credible official websites for this advice. And things change constantly. I know that as of June 1st, there were a number of changes. They have kind of slowed down a little bit, but what you find is the different stages happen for different parts of our state. They go into different phases, different things are open. So if you are traveling around the state, you might want to look online and see exactly what the guidelines are for the particular counties that you're going to. Here's the 4th question that we asked. What did your family do to cope with sheltering in place? We know that sheltering in place can make you a little stir crazy at sometimes, but what are some of the things that you could be doing? Of course, the number 1 answer was gardening. Then digitally connecting with family and friends. Just like people who are here today, there's a lot of Zoom meetings that are going on. Of course, we have FaceTime, and I believe Facebook itself also has a venue now. You can meet with friends and family, do your public meetings. Getting exercise and spending time outdoors is also a great thing to do. You know, just remember that social distancing component of it, so that if you are out hiking, you want to keep that distance between you and other hiking groups. Baking was another big one. I don't know how many of you had gone to the grocery stores and found that they had no flour and they had no yeast. Everybody was baking. I believe a lot of the stores have been restocked yet, but there still are a number of things that are a little harder to find. Home improvement was another big one. Whether you were cleaning out your closets or helping rebuild that deck. I know the home improvement stores were open this whole time, so you could use that to fix and do new projects at home. Helping neighbors and community, that's always a great way to help out. More movies and games. I mean, how many of us watched a lot of Netflix? More sleep than normal, which is Probably a really common response to people being stressed is you do tend to sleep a little bit more, but I think that's a good thing. You want to be more specific with your self-care and your favorite activities, and updating your preparedness kit. So these were some of the things that our members said that they did. How can I help my family cope with the pandemic? Well, you want to start out by, of course, respecting the safety recommendations. You can see in the first picture there, they've got their masks on, they've got some gloves on, they're keeping socially distant, and they're doing it outside. I believe since they're figuring out that this virus tends to be mostly airborne and can be transmitted by when you're speaking, keeping that distance will help keep that down a lot. If you're going to be having your preparing your home and your family, and you want to restrict those gatherings, again, that's where we're seeing, unfortunately, a big uptick in the number of cases. It's when people get together to celebrate Grandpa's 80th birthday, and God love them, you know, you want to, but that's where you're starting to see a lot of cases coming from, are those private gatherings. Again, you want to make sure that you reach out to your community and your friends where possible. As seniors, I know that a lot of times we'll get a little bit more isolated, but this is not the time to do that. And it doesn't mean going and having people over to your house to have coffee, but you certainly can connect by talking to your neighbors over the fence. You know, you've got your phone, make sure that you have phone numbers for at least your immediate neighbors. Is there a friend that you can check in with every day just to make sure that you're okay, that they're okay? Especially if you're living at home alone, you should have somebody that you're contacting once a day. And you want to try and think outside of the box in terms of how can you do family activities. I have been to a couple of family gatherings where we've sat outside in the backyard and everybody is socially distanced. And we still had a great time by being able to chat. You know, we didn't have the big family hugs like we used to, but that's okay, those will come back someday. But the point was we were still able to be with each other, but we kept that distance and wearing our masks, so that was greatly reducing any kind of possible transmissions. You can be, again, helping out your neighbors. Maybe you're not the person that needs help, but maybe you have a neighbor as a senior who does need some help, and check in with them. Do they need some groceries that you could pick up for them? Could you pick up their medications? And I know there's another process to be able to do that because of security and safety issues with the pharmacy, but maybe they could call their pharmacist and say, I'm sending my neighbor, here's her name, and she's going to come pick up my meds. But you want to think of things that you could do each week. You know, it's really easy to get yourself sort of bogged down in this and maybe get sad because of the fact that you can't be going out and doing the things that you normally do. But, you know, try and be creative and think of other things that, you know, you want to accomplish each week. And, you know, maybe it's getting through that new book, or maybe it's figuring out, learning how to paint. You know, do some things that will help you, because we know that being mentally depressed can be just as hard as being physically or emotionally compromised as well. So take care of yourself. What's next that I can do in my community to help? So now this one is a little bit more geared towards general things, but again, checking on your neighbors, especially your seniors and the vulnerable populations. Do you have someone who is going through cancer treatment? Could they use some extra help with, again, getting their supplies or their groceries? And there's, you have the Issaquah Citizen Corps, which is very similar to what I do out in Carnation. Issaquah Citizen Corps is a very active group. Here's a link to their website as well. And some of the major programs that they have are, first of all, the CERT program, the Community Emergency Response Teams. And that's like the one that Joyce has recently taken. I'm also an instructor and help with the CERT classes that we do out in Carnation, Duval. This is a FEMA course that is offered usually a couple times a year in these different areas. And it's a 21-hour course where you go through and you learn things like how to use a fire extinguisher, how to lift heavy objects off of maybe a person with something has fallen on them. You learn basic personal preparedness, you learn medical triage. So a whole bunch of skills that you can use to either help your family, maybe to help your neighborhood, or to help your community as a whole. There's also a division of the Citizen Corps that's called Medical Reserve Corps. And that is for people who either have some sort of a licensing or medical ability to practice. Say, for example, if you're a nurse and you live in Issaquah, but you work in Seattle. Well, if for some reason roads are closed and you can't get to Seattle, you can still help out in your community by joining the Medical Reserve Corps. And it's meant to gather people that have these special skills and certificates and licenses, but you can also join it if you're just a general person who wants to help out. You might be someone who's doing clerical work for it instead of the actual medical work, but that is a team that you can help out with as well. I know in Issaquah they have a radio and communication group. For example, if you want to learn about using a ham radio, they will help you get your license for that. And one of the big things that they have found is in larger disasters, say for example, remember back to Hurricane Katrina, all the cell towers went down. You weren't able to use your phones in general, but the one thing that was working through all that were ham radios, because people who have ham radios, they're always having other means of powering them up, whether it's a battery operated unit or a desktop unit that can connect to portable batteries, but they always have a way to be able to get out and to talk to other people in the area so they can relate the things that are needed. And I know in Carnation Duval Citizen Corps, our ham radio group is a really integral part of what we do. And it's great to see Issaquah has one as well. And then of course, the last thing was the Map Your Neighborhood program. Map Your Neighborhood is a program that was started in California and has been adopted by, I believe, first the city of Seattle and then the Washington State Department of Emergency Management. And it's a program that's set up to reach out to your neighbors. We recommend that you can get together a group of your neighbors that maybe live in your cul-de-sac, or you all live on one central street, or if you are more rural area, maybe it's homes that you can get to within an hour if you had to walk to them. And it's meant to get people together to talk about how they can help each other. What kind of resources do you have at your home? Are you first aid trained? Maybe do you have a chainsaw that you could bring if, for example, we had a lot of trees down, we couldn't get out of the neighborhood. But it's a way to pool all these resources and information, and also to put together centers where you can help each other. As I had mentioned before, say for example, if you had a lot of young children in your neighborhood and maybe you worked in Bellevue and you're not able to get home by the time the kids get out of school, or if school is dismissed early, where would they go? Well, you might put together a child care home where all the kids in the neighborhood could gather at that home, and all the parents would have the information about where they're going. You would instruct your kids on where to go, and then you would have contact phone numbers or information about that home, so you could reach out to them and find out how your kids are doing and let them know, when you thought you might be able to be there for them. You could also have a care center for medical needs. Again, I mentioned first aid, or if you have something where someone is medically fragile and maybe they could go there and have someone help watch over them. So again, lots of different ways that you can help your community and how you can get involved. Any questions? Again, we're going through a lot of information here, but any other questions about any of those programs that are available to you, or how you might reach out to your neighbors? Okay. So this is the information again for me. We've got our Carnation Duval Citizen Corps. We have the three programs, the CERT, the Medical Reserve Corps, and our ham radio group is called SNOVARC, the Snow Valley Amateur Radio Club. So I just put this up. This is information about my group. So that was all I had for this presentation. I wasn't sure if there were any questions or comments that anybody else wanted to share, or experiences of what they've been doing, other than I know Joyce mentioned her National Night Out, which is a great program, a great way to connect.
I just think it's very worthwhile to hear this more than once a year too, just because of the way we forget it. I've been a first aid and CPR instructor for, since the 1960s, and more recently with the ski patrol at Alpental than anybody else. And my husband and I are both ham radio people. And now we're experimenting with the 10 meter, which of course is worldwide. It's just a fun hobby to get involved in. And we do have an RV that we consider our disaster shelter. Although trying to connect all good, up-to-date medications is always an issue, because our Medicare provider likes to do it in just giving you your 90-day supply. They don't want you to have anything more socked away anywhere.
Yeah, you're right. And you'll have to check with them to see what they'll allow you to do. But I've even done the same thing with my husband's supplies he gets through Medicare, is I will order them about a week early. And that way I can still build up that little extra supply of things to have around. But it is helpful when they issue you 90 days worth. But if you were at, week 11 and the disaster hit, you might not be able to get your supplies in quickly. So, working out something, a plan for yourself, that's a great idea. But yeah, I applaud you guys. You guys are really active in emergency preparedness and response. And I think the more you get into it, the more you'll find things that interest you specifically, whether it is ham radios, or maybe you like working more with seniors and want to figure out how you can help through your senior center. But there's lots of things you can do and lots of things to prepare yourself. I'm always finding new things that I can add to my kits, and I go to discussions like this, quite often, because I know there's a lot of great ideas out there. So, but don't let it become overwhelming to you. If you haven't done any preparedness, that's all right. Start small. When I first started doing, getting involved with emergency preparedness was when my son was in kindergarten or first grade, and I went to a PTSA meeting, and they said, all right, they talked all about emergency preparedness, and they said, go home, get a box, put 2 rolls of toilet paper in it tonight, and that's your start. And that's what I did, and then just gradually add things. So again, you work at a pace that's comfortable for you. There's a lot of different lists out there, whether you go to the American Red Cross, or even if you go to the Carnation Duval Citizen Corps page, we have links on there that have lists of things that you might want to add to your kits. Or if you can view this webinar again, you can go back and look at some of the things that were listed there. So great ideas.
How do we get into the YouTube?
I'm sorry?
Catherine was mentioning that this gets posted to YouTube. How do we suggest that people go and find the YouTube for it?
Well, it might take a while. We have somebody in communications who puts a nice title on it. But once that is up, hopefully in the next couple weeks, what I do is I just Google City of Issaquah YouTube, and you can find the YouTube page. And then at the top, I usually click on videos, because the first page is in different groups. And so if you just click on videos, the videos will be in there in order that they occurred. So it'll just, it's kind of a lot of videos, but the city has been asking us, because we do, public information like this webinar, to put it out there. So, yeah.
You might also share this with the Issaquah Citizen Corps, because they may want to link something to this or something similar to their own page.
Okay, well, that's a good idea. Yeah. Well, I really liked how you integrated the preparedness with the things that are going on now as far as the pandemic. So I found that really helpful, and just, nice reminders for everyone. Because as Joyce said, you need, the more you hear it over and over again, then the more it's, you can take action on it. So really, really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you. Well, as that you hear it all over the place, we're in this together, and we certainly are, whether it's a pandemic or if it's an earthquake or floods. The reality is that our first responders, they work so hard, but there are very few of them. Say, for example, in Carnation, I believe the fire station is manned by 3 people all the time, but that's
Wow.
3 people.
Yeah.
And if there is a really big disaster, their job is not to go out and put out house fires or to rescue people. Their first job is going to be to go and assess the damage and report that back. So then they can figure out what kind of resources, whether it's material or human resources, to bring in and take care of that. So we really do need to be taking care of ourselves and our neighbors when there is a big event, because our first responders won't be able to be there, at least initially.
Yeah. Yeah.
But thank you for letting me share this information, and I'm always
Yeah.
available
Thank
if
you
you
so
have more
much.
questions or comments. And again,